Hello, and welcome to this overview of new releases that I read that were published in March of 2024. I'm Olivia, your favorite resource for book recommendations you can easily screenshot, and you're watching Random Olive Reads. The Perks of Loving a Viscount by Alexa Aston is book 2 of the Strongs of Shadowcrest series. Lady Philippa Strong is a duke's sister who would rather wear breeches and gallivant her country home than become a sparkling debutante. She's not interested in becoming a wife and mother and property of another man, so she wants to retain her independence. Although, when she meets the handsome new Viscount next door, she's starting to question things a little. Seth is the son of the fourth son of a viscount and never expected to inherit anything. After spending most of his life at sea, he is shocked to find out that he is suddenly the new viscount after the death of his uncles and father. With no experience of being on land or the ways of polite society, he relies on his new neighbors for help, especially the help of Pippa to teach him how to ride a horse. As they spend more time together, Seth is sure that Pippa will make him an excellent wife, but he's careful not to scare her off. This one was another fun look at the Strong family and how well they accept each other. I also appreciate a man who quickly knows what he wants and goes after it. Mad Duke March by Sadie Bosk is book 3 of the Rake Review series. The Duke of Tyrone has a tragic history of a mother who abandoned him and a father who beat and berated him, so now he's a reckless drunk with no ambitions or goals or sense of proper behavior. A public street experiment of a steam carriage almost injures a young lady, and in the process of rescuing her, Tyrone drunkenly grabs her in a salacious manner and ruins her reputation. Emily is the young woman ruined by the whole thing, with tattered clothes, a lost purse of money, and a lost fiance in the process. And of course, she's also generally impoverished with an ill mother and 3 younger siblings to care for. Somehow she convinces Tyrone to marry her to save her skin, but he's still a general brute and incapable of treating his wife properly. It's a big, huge leap to see them eventually come to an accord, but Emily's spine of steel has a lot to do with it. The Wickedness of a Highlander by Elisa Braden is book 4 of the Midnight in Scotland series. Sabella is the sheltered and abused younger sister of one of the major villains of this series, alone in the world and swindled out of all of her worldly possessions. Stranded and desperate, she takes the job of housekeeper at the gruff and growling Alexander's house. Alexander hasn't been the same since he was shot by Sabella's brother many months ago and still not fully recovered from his injuries. By taking in Sabella and forcing her to do all the chores of the house, he's hoping to get his revenge and maybe purge his lustful thoughts of her from his mind. Except she's determined and resilient even though she's a terrible housekeeper, and she does her best to earn her wages. And it doesn't hurt that she's also harboring lustful thoughts for Alexander and finds him to be kind and gentlemanly. This one's another grumpy, overprotective Highlander with a sheltered young miss falling in love. Damned If I Duke by Anna Bradley is book 2 of the Drop Dead Duke series. Poor Prudence has been in a tough spot since her father lost a great deal of money to a certain rakish duke in a card game, and she's putting up with her friend's matchmaking efforts while she's visiting. Except Prudence dreads the idea of having to marry to secure a home, even though her father is on the verge of selling their home. Meanwhile, rakish Duke Jasper has just recovered some scandalous earrings from a former mistress, and when Prudence discovers them, he tries to blackmail him into forgiving her father's debts. She's comically bad at blackmail, though, and both of these people are feeling generally guilty about their behavior. They're also stupidly attracted to each other, even though they don't really like each other. It's a bunch of chaos and comedy with these two, but at least Jasper's stodgy grandfather approves of Prudence. Behind the Camera by Chelsea Curto is a contemporary sports romance and book 3 of the Love Through a Lens series. This one is sweet and funny and super steamy all in one book. Dallas is our single dad football player, almost ready to retire from the game since he can't find a reliable nanny to take care of his daughter, June. Apparently, they're all just trying to get into his bed instead of actually doing their jobs. Meanwhile, newbie team photographer Maven, who's also the coach's goddaughter, needs some extra cash to pay her rent, and Dallas offers her the job. Lucky for everyone involved, Maven is great with June and definitely prioritizes her care and needs. But of course, Dallas and Maven are very much attracted to each other. They resist at first due to their working relationship and the fact that it would be against the football team rules at their other job. But that only lasts so long. This book was delightful and steamy and relatively low conflict. It's my favorite kind of book to kind of pace myself with for glimpses of joy and happiness. The Love Remedy by Elizabeth Everett is book one of the Damsels of Discovery series. Lucy is the intelligent and outspoken owner of an apothecary, and she's hired an investigator to find out who has stolen one of her recipes. Jonathan is a prize fighter and single father who takes on the job. While Lucy suspects that a rival apothecary has stolen the recipe since the scoundrel had run off with a different recipe in the past, Jonathan isn't so sure this time. As part of Jonathan's payment, he and his daughter take up residence in the empty apartment above the apothecary. We get a fun mix of characters here with Lucy's siblings, Jonathan's daughter, and the shop girl who works at the apothecary, and I enjoyed seeing them all interact. While the romance between Lucy and Jonathan is slow burn, I appreciated seeing Jonathan support Lucy's intelligence while also providing emotional support. We also do find out the answer to the mystery of the missing recipe while catching up with a few of our favorites from Everett's previous series. Age to Perfection by Mary Farmer is book one of the Unlucky in Love series. Now, to make sure you aren't as confused as I was when I started reading, we're in some sort of alternate universe, Regency England here, with different kingdoms and factions within England that are not necessarily united. They all have slightly different laws and customs, and this gets referred to frequently as characters from different regions interact. Story wise, we start with a duke telling all his sons and nephews to get married, and the last unmarried man will inherit the family cursed castle. Oldest son Cedric jumps right on the task, even though he had loved and lost his mistress many years ago. He somehow ends up matched up with his friend's sister Muriel. Except that when he goes to start courting Muriel, she's completely resistant to marriage and all the restrictions that it places on women. There's a lot of back and forth flirtation between these two and a bunch of heartbreak as Muriel continually refuses Cedric's proposals despite his need to get married to avoid the family curse. Sincerely the Duke by Amelia Gray is book two of the Say I Do series. Rick is a duke who suffers from both secret debilitating fevers and a meddlesome mother. When his mother presents him a list of debutantes to consider for marriage, he hurriedly pens a quick marriage proposal to a random lady on the list. A few days later, that lady shows up at his doorstep inquiring about the veracity of the proposal, and being the upstanding, honorable guy that he is, he decides to follow through with it. Edwina is a take charge, outspoken sort of lady who has made her father a deathbed promise to see herself and her sisters wed this season, even though they've been hidden away in the country. It turns out triplets are thought to be bad luck, so they've tried to hide the fact that they're triplets, even though they look exactly alike. She's glad to be engaged to the Duke, but insists that he help her find her sister's husbands. We get a lot more chaotic when the sisters show up in town, who are, by the way, highly resistant to marriage, and find out that Rick's mother is super superstitious. I like seeing Rick become protective of his new wife and family, and also see him appreciate Edwina's unique personality. Bequeathed by Andy James is book one of the Beaumonts series. West is the new Marquess and has inherited an impoverished estate that he needs to revive. While he's at it, he also wants to avoid doing anything his overly strict late father would have approved of, like marrying a wealthy woman for her dowry. Priscilla is a young widowed duchess out of mourning and in the swing of the season, looking to assert her independence and not just go along with her parents' expectations. Unfortunately, her late husband left her with quite a bit of money, so the fortune hunting gentlemen are paying way too much attention for her liking. Priscilla and West are encouraged by their respective parents to spend time together, Both are clear that they're not interested in attachment, and then end up in a fake engagement to get their families and fortune hunters to leave them alone. As they spend more time together, they realize that they do genuinely like each other, despite their social appropriateness. The question becomes what to do with their newfound feelings when they've already agreed to an expiration date of their relationship. The Duchess by Sophie Jordan is book 2 of the Scandalous Ladies of London series. Valencia is a widowed duchess and finally trying to live her best life after her year of mourning. Turns out her late husband was cruel and abusive to her in his later years, and she's relieved that he's gone. The downside is the new Duke and his mother and 6 very loud sisters have just arrived in town and taking over her home. Rain is disturbed to find that the widow Duchess is young and beautiful and wants to get rid of her as soon as he can, but then he realizes he needs her help to polish up his unruly sisters. It's all sorts of chaos and strong personalities as Valencia whips them all into shape. Plus, Valencia and Rain have all sorts of simmering attraction for each other despite trying to stay away from each other. The romance here was a bit underdeveloped for my taste, with a quick flip from arguing to falling in love. However, Rain's good natured protection of Valencia and his sisters was enjoyable to read. Kilt Trip by Alexandra Kiley is a contemporary standalone romance novel. Addie is a travel consultant, always on the go, since she doesn't really have a place she calls home. She's working on a job in Scotland where her late mother had visited long ago and is working through feelings of grief while simultaneously keeping her feelings walled off. Addie has tons of ideas on how to better market and commercialize the family owned tour company, but Logan is highly resistant to change. He just wants to stick to traditions and roots and not go with any of the touristy gimmicks that other tours offer. Addie and Logan are constantly disagreeing on their direction, even though they're highly attracted to each other. They've both got to deal with all of their emotional roadblocks if they want to get together for real and not just as a temporary affair. Silhouette of a Spinster and Other Seductions by Charlie Lane is book 4 of the Art of Love series. Lord Andrew is the straight laced, icy cold, emotionless workaholic who runs an employment agency for governesses, companions, and tutors. And he is seriously disturbed by the fact that his ultra competent, no nonsense, straight laced secretary is wearing a pink dress instead of gray to his brother's wedding. He is your typical oblivious male character with no idea that Amelia has been secretly in love with him for all of these years. When he tells her that he's planning to marry for money in order to expand his business, she is internally heartbroken and decides to leave on a month-long vacation to her estate in Scotland to get her feelings in order. Well, Andrew is all sorts of confused about his own feelings and why he's betrayed by her abandonment, so he runs after her. And he's still totally incapable of feeling his feelings, even when faced with the attractive woman he finds there. This one is a heartbreaker of a book in all the best ways. Kilty by Association by Caroline Lee is book 3 of the Kilty Pleasure series. Widowed Elspeth needs a bodyguard to protect her young Earl of a son from more assassination attempts, and she tries to hire a criminal at a pub to do so. Except that Craig isn't actually a criminal and he's undercover at the seedy pub to try to catch some other crime boss. They meet again the next day when it turns out the king has assigned Craig to protect Elspeth's family anyway in an official capacity, and off they go on the journey back to their home castle. It's a quick and easy attraction between these two, with Craig being amazing with Elspeth's kids and basically being an awesome family man. But Craig is feeling insecure about his lower station compared to Elspeth. Once we're back at their castle, it's easy to figure out who the villain is, but still nice to see the villain get their due. This was a quick read with all of the humor and family shenanigans you would expect from this author. Flirty Little Secret by Jessica Lepe is a standalone contemporary romance novel. We start with the most awkward meeting ever when guidance counselor Lucy spills a cup of hot tea all over the front of the new history teacher Fletcher's pants and then tries to clean it up with her scarf. Both are completely embarrassed and mortified, especially since the other person is so attractive. We learn more about each of their backstories in pretty short order. Fletcher has moved back home with his mom after finding out that his father had an affair and his mistress is pregnant. Lucy has the trifecta of depression, anxiety, and ADHD, and just trying to keep it together. Lucy channels her wisdom into an anonymous online persona who does not have any insecurities or anxieties and is able to dispense oh so worldly advice. It turns out her number one Instagram fan and friend is Fletcher, and neither of them know who the other person is in real life. Outside of the screen, Lucy and Fletcher get to know each other more as coworkers, and then friends, and then maybe more. Lucy's got a boisterous and hilarious family, and Fletcher is pretty much just happy to be part of it all. This book was both sweet and funny, and also featured an understanding and reassuring guy. A Duke Once Lost by Jane Maguire is book two of the Rockcliffe Dynasty series. We start with a tragic prologue for Lady Amelia, who has been jilted by the man she planned to elope with. 11 years later, Amelia never married and still lives with her overbearing mother. However, she soon finds out that the man who left her has recently come back to the country and is now a duke. And she has a separate problem of a gentleman blackmailing her into marriage with the knowledge that she secretly writes an advice column in a ladies' magazine. Jonathan was the nephew of a debaucherous and irresponsible duke, and now trying to take his duties seriously, except that he still has a bit of a stammer and is trying to avoid the mocking ridicule of the men he went to school with. Jonathan quickly hightails it out of town in an unmarked carriage and runs into Amelia on the side of the road. He rescues her despite her protests, and then she convinces him to convey her to her target destination out in the country. We follow them through road trip trials like rain, robbers, crusty old inns, and carriage problems. And they finally talk through some of the issues that broke them apart all those years ago. But mostly they're just trying to maintain some semblance of self control around the person they still love. Lady Charlotte Always Gets Her Man by Violet Marsh is a standalone romance novel. Lady Charlotte is the daughter of a duke being set up to marry the heir to a duke, but he's got a reputation for being violent and may have actually murdered his previous wives. She's looking to find proof of his guilt so that she can avoid marrying him. Meanwhile, that man's younger brother and her own brother's best friend, Matthew, is back in town and he's hiding his own secrets. Charlotte isn't sure whether or not to trust him, but we know that Matthew is trying his best to find proof of his brother's crimes too. These two are definitely in each other's way and skirting all sorts of danger, but they'll shortly realize that they need to team up in order to accomplish their goals. This was an action packed mystery type of story with two people who have had pre existing crushes on each other and kisses only. We get a fun group of crime fighting friends and cousins and a chatty parrot if you're into that sort of humor. One Dangerous Night by Kathy Maxwell is book two of the Gambler's Daughter series. Elise is on her way back to Ireland from London after her sister marries the man that she thought she was in love with. Of course, she runs into all sorts of calamity along the way and is saved by her traveling companion, Kit, who is actually a duke who ran away from his own responsibilities and has been wandering the countryside for a year or so. These two obviously don't know the other person's real identity, they make assumptions about each other, and are basically arguing the whole way through. But Kit is still gentlemanly and protective of Elise despite her stubbornness throughout the journey. We get all sorts of travel adventure here with carriage accidents, ruffians, and sparse accommodations. It's a fun ride. Plus, we get a few glimpses of other points of view when Elise's sisters realize she's missing. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you found a book or two to add to your TBR. Links to all of these books are in the description box. Like and subscribe to get updates, and you can follow me on Instagram at randomolive.